He sat alone at the edge of the lake, a quiet ripple breaking the otherwise still surface. Thomas was in his mid-50s, a former military strategist turned consultant whose past had been painted with both triumph and regret. The wind whispered through the trees behind him, yet his thoughts were louder. He wasn't here for peace. He was here to remember a code, one he had lived by but let slip in recent years. Life is not the smooth road we once imagined in our youth. It's not a clean race with a clear finish line. It's more like a battlefield, cleverly disguised as a chessboard. Those who rush forward, eager to win, often fall first. The desperate drown in their own panic. The ones who show their hunger become prey. But what if you knew how to move differently? What if you could wait, not out of fear, but out of mastery? The man who learns to wait without tension, who uses stillness as a weapon, becomes untouchable. Thomas learned this not from books, but from failure. Moments when he reacted too soon, spoke too much, or trusted the wrong people. Those losses etched a lesson deep into his mind. Control is silent. Waiting, he discovered, is not inaction. It's power cloaked in calm. It's not the absence of options. It's the ability to see more of them. A hunter waits not because he's passive, but because he knows timing changes everything. He remembered training young officers who mistook noise for strength, speed for intelligence. But when they were taught to move with discipline, to speak with intention, they became leaders. Now, Thomas was relearning this truth for himself. Life had tested him recently. Health scares, financial turbulence, and the departure of people he once relied on. But instead of reacting like the younger version of himself, he paused. He listened. He studied. He waited. There is a kind of victory only patience brings. It is the quiet triumph of knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to act and when to hold the line. It is the satisfaction of watching others exhaust themselves while you grow sharper in the background. Patience in this form is a discipline, a practice, a choice, and the longer you hold it, the more powerful it becomes. Thomas rose from the bench and looked out over the lake. The ripples had disappeared. The water was still again. It reminded him of who he needed to be, not loud, not reactive, but deliberate. He whispered to himself, "I move when I decide, not when the world expects." This was just the beginning. There were more principles to revisit, more layers of strength to rebuild, but it would all begin here, with the art of waiting, with Machiavellian patience, with the stillness of a storm not yet released. And so, he walked back into the world, not to chase it, but to let it come to him, on his time, on his terms. There's a rare kind of strength that doesn't shout, doesn't swing wildly, doesn't show its teeth. It's the kind that holds still while the world thrashes. It's called restraint. And in a society that mistakes chaos for confidence, restraint has become one of the most misunderstood powers. Thomas understood this well. In his early years, he thought dominance was about movement, rushing in, proving his worth, showing that he belonged. But age has a way of clarifying things. The older he grew, the more he saw how noise betrayed insecurity. The ones who talked the most were the least certain. The ones who acted first often acted without direction. He remembered a moment in a boardroom meeting when a younger executive exploded in frustration over a failed negotiation. Thomas remained silent. Everyone expected him to respond, expected anger, words, retaliation, but he gave them none of it. Instead, he watched. The silence grew uncomfortable. The others fidgeted. Eventually, someone else stepped in to support his stance. He hadn't lifted a finger, yet he had won the room. Restraint is not suppression. It's precision. It's the ability to delay gratification, to pause before reacting, to let the emotional wave pass so that logic can prevail. The man who can restrain himself is feared, not because he is loud, but because he is unreadable. You never know what he's thinking, what he's planning, or when he will strike. And when he does, it is final. In psychology, this is linked to the concept of delayed response, training the mind to observe without immediately acting. Neurologically, those who master this form of control engage the prefrontal cortex rather than allowing the amygdala, the center of emotional impulse, to dictate behavior. This is not just theory, it is practice, and it is power. Thomas often thought of it as cold fire. The energy is still there, still burning, but it's contained, focused, unleashed only with purpose. Restraint turns reaction into calculation. Emotion becomes fuel, not fire. And in a world addicted to attention, he had learned that sometimes the greatest power comes from doing nothing at all. The world around you will tempt you to react. Insults, setbacks, betrayals, they all beg for response. But when you pause, when you wait, when you remain still while the chaos unfolds, you become the calm in the storm, and the storm begins to revolve around you. That day at the lake had reminded Thomas of this power. Restraint was no longer just a concept to him, it was a way of life, a weapon holstered, always ready but rarely drawn. He had seen too many fall, not because they were weak, but because they could not stop themselves from proving they were strong. And so he lived now with this code. Act rarely, act decisively. Let others waste their energy while you conserve yours. Let them guess. Let them talk. Let them burn. You sit in the silence. You wait. And when you move, the ground shakes. Write this in your own heart, if not in the comments. I rule my emotions. They do not rule me. In a world flooded with noise, silence is a weapon, and few know how to wield it. Thomas had come to understand that the loudest person in the room rarely holds the power. True authority doesn't beg for attention. It commands it through presence. And nothing builds presence like the discipline of silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of intention. He recalled his days consulting for high-stakes negotiations in New York. He had watched men ruin their own leverage by speaking too soon, offering unnecessary justifications, revealing hidden fears, exposing intentions. Each word was a thread, unraveling their position. Meanwhile, the men who said little, who allowed silence to stretch uncomfortably, always came out ahead. Because in the vacuum of silence, others fill the space with assumptions, with projection, with fear. Silence, Thomas realized, was strategy. Every time you rush to explain yourself, you surrender power. Every time you react too quickly, you give away your hand. But when you speak only when necessary, and every word has weight, people begin to lean in. They begin to wonder. They begin to respect you. Not because they understand you, but because they can't. This is psychological leverage. A silent man becomes a mirror. People project their hopes, their fears, their doubts onto him. They try to decipher what's behind the quiet, and in doing so, they reveal themselves. Thomas used this tactic often. In rooms full of ambition and ego, he would sit still, let the noise swirl, and say little. Eventually, the others would talk themselves into corners while he listened, collected data, and waited. But this strategy of silence was not born from arrogance. It was born from control. Neuroscience suggests that silence can activate the brain's default mode network, allowing for deeper thinking, pattern recognition, and long-term planning. In short, those who are comfortable with quiet moments are often the ones thinking several moves ahead. Consider a skilled chess player. They don't announce their strategy, they contemplate each move with quiet concentration. Their silence is not hesitation, it is focus. Thomas modeled his own behavior accordingly. He became a person of few words, but when he spoke, people listened. When he acted, outcomes shifted. He once mentored a young entrepreneur named Michael, who tended to over-explain and clarify every decision. Thomas advised him, "When you speak at length, you give others a map to your thoughts. If they know how you think, they can outmaneuver you. Make them guess, make them work to understand you." Michael learned. Slowly, he began to embrace silence. In time, his deals improved, his confidence grew, and people began to regard him as a man of gravity, not noise. This is the path. If you want to be more than strong, if you want to be inevitable, you must master silence. Control your words like currency. Let them accrue interest in stillness. And when you finally spend them, make sure they buy results. Thomas's rule was simple. Speak only to strike. Be quiet to gain power. Let mystery be your shadow. Because clarity may win applause, but mystery earns respect. Repeat it to yourself. My silence is my weapon. My timing is my kill. Power belongs to those who wait, not out of fear or indecision, but out of mastery. Thomas had come to this truth the hard way. In his younger years, he rushed into business deals, into relationships, into decisions that felt urgent but weren't. And time, with its cold wisdom, taught him that the man who waits with clarity will always outmaneuver the man who acts in haste. This wasn't about hesitation. The hesitant man fears the outcome. The disciplined man controls it. There's a quiet confidence in patience, the kind that unnerves those who expect quick reactions. Thomas remembered a time in Chicago years ago when his company was being pressured into a merger. Everyone around him wanted to act, feared missing the opportunity, but he waited, he listened, he watched. Eventually, the other company exposed their desperation, revealed internal instability, and the deal crumbled on its own. Had Thomas moved early, he would have inherited chaos. But because he waited, he stayed intact. He didn't just survive, he emerged stronger. That's the power of the predator's patience. In nature, the eagle doesn't waste energy chasing every shadow. It circles calmly, waiting. Then, with sudden force, it strikes once and decisively. That model stayed with Thomas. In psychology, this is known as response inhibition, our ability to suppress impulsive behavior and delay action until the optimal moment. Studies show that those who excel at this live longer, make better financial choices, and achieve higher long-term success. This isn't just theory. It's biology and strategy combined. But the world doesn't reward patience publicly. Society screams, "Act now, don't miss out, hurry or lose." Urgency has become a form of manipulation, and many fall for it, panicking at the thought of missing their chance. Thomas learned to see through that illusion. He understood that nothing of real value vanishes in an instant. If something is truly meant for you, it will withstand your pause. So he began practicing strategic waiting. Not passive stalling, but active preparation. While others moved wildly, he trained. While others spent energy, he gathered it. And when the moment came, when the door opened, he didn't hesitate. He walked through, fully prepared. That's the difference between stalling and patience. One is rooted in fear. The other is rooted in power. Thomas had learned to be the man who could sit in the storm and not flinch. Because people reveal themselves when they're forced to wait. They show their cracks, their desperation, their need for control. But the man who remains still, he gains control. He becomes the center others orbit. This is more than mindset. It's muscle. You must train it, delay gratification, sit in discomfort, say no to urgency, and over time you will feel your center of gravity shift. You will begin to sense when to move and when not to. And when you do act, your timing will feel almost prophetic. So here's the mantra Thomas lived by. I wait because I'm in control. My time is always perfect. This is the patience of the predator, the patience that makes you untouchable. Everyone suffers. Everyone bleeds. But not everyone transforms their suffering into strength. That's the difference between surviving and ascending. Thomas stood in front of the mirror one morning, years after a betrayal that nearly ended both his marriage and his business. The pain had been deep, so deep it altered his posture, his tone, his presence. But over time, he discovered something extraordinary. Pain could be a teacher or it could be a tomb. The choice was his. The masses numb their pain. They drown it in distractions, alcohol, scrolling, busyness, empty pleasures. But Thomas did the opposite. He walked directly into it. He studied it. He let it scar him. And in doing so, he found a kind of strength that was immune to flattery, immune to fear. Suffering, he realized, is not punishment. It is preparation. Just like fire tempers steel, hardship tempers men. And only those who endure the burning emerge sharp enough to cut through anything. Psychology calls this post-traumatic growth. Those who lean into adversity, who reflect, rebuild, and refocus, come out not just healed, but enhanced. Thomas became more focused, more efficient, and more self-aware than ever before. He began to collect his wounds like a warrior collects medals, not out of pride, but out of clarity. Each one reminded him he had been tested, and he was still here. While others collapsed under pressure, he stood. Not because he didn't feel pain, but because he learned to carry it with dignity. There is a dangerous power in a man who has suffered deeply and yet stands calm. Society expects trauma to leave you broken. When you rise instead, sharper, colder, more disciplined, it unsettles people. They cannot categorize you, they cannot pity you, and that makes you a mystery they fear. Masculine stoicism isn't about ignoring pain, it's about refusing to be defined by it. Thomas still felt grief, betrayal, anger. But those emotions became signals, not chains. He no longer reacted from them. He responded with wisdom shaped by them. He often told his mentees, "Pain is fuel, don't waste it, store it, sharpen it, and when the moment comes, unleash it." That energy, directed with focus, is almost unstoppable. It moves mountains. Not through rage, but through relentless discipline. One night, Thomas sat by the fireplace journaling. He wrote a sentence that would become his new mantra. "My pain is not my weakness. My pain is my weapon." It reminded him that everything that hurt him had built him, that every betrayal became a lesson, every failure became an edge, and every scar became armor. This is how strong men are made, not in comfort, not in applause, but in fire. When you rise from pain without bitterness, when you walk forward without needing revenge, only direction, that is when you become untouchable. Remember this: don't run from pain, don't hide from it, turn toward it, study it, master it. Let it chisel you into something rare. Because in the end, pain doesn't just break you, it reveals who you were always meant to be. Power isn't granted, it's claimed. But the most effective power isn't taken by force, it's absorbed through influence. That was the next lesson Thomas had come to live by. Real strength is the ability to bend people and situations without raising your voice, without lifting a hand. People are not as complicated as they appear. Thomas had spent years studying them, clients, competitors, partners, and the truth was always the same: fear, greed, pride. These were the gears that turned the machinery of behavior. When you understand those levers, you stop reacting to people. You begin to direct them. He once mentored a senior executive who constantly clashed with his team. "Why won't they follow me?" the man asked in frustration. Thomas told him, "Because you're trying to lead with pressure. Stop pushing, start pulling." Influence doesn't come from force, it comes from positioning. And this is the key. People follow presence. They are drawn to what feels unshakable. Thomas had built his career on this kind of cold power. He would walk into rooms, say little, but change the entire atmosphere. Not because he was charismatic, but because he radiated control. Others bent toward his center because it gave them something to orbit. He used 3 principles. First, people are predictable. If you listen long enough, they will tell you what drives them. If you watch closely enough, they will show you their weaknesses. This information is power. It's not about exploitation, it's about leverage. Influence flows from understanding. Second, never reveal your full strength. Let them underestimate you. Mystery creates caution. If they can't read you, they can't manipulate you. If they don't know your limits, they won't test them. Thomas learned early that revealing too much invites sabotage, but when you withhold, you control the narrative. Third, control the frame. Circumstances will shift, people will panic, but the one who controls the meaning of events controls reality itself. When Thomas failed publicly once, he reframed it as strategic withdrawal. He told no one the full story, but the story they believed gave him more power than the truth ever could. This isn't deception, it's discipline, it's leadership. Dark psychology teaches that people crave certainty, and when you offer it, through calm, patient silence, they hand you their loyalty without even knowing why. Thomas likened himself to a rock in a river. He didn't resist the current. He let it flow around him. He adapted without losing center. The river carved a path into his advantage, not the other way around. People and circumstances both respond to gravity. If you become heavy with presence, through consistency, composure, and patience, they will bend toward you. They will choose your path over their own chaos. This is not dominance through noise, it is dominance through inevitability. The man who moves least often moves the most decisively. The man who says the least often holds the most sway. Thomas's code was this: I don't chase, I attract, I bend the world to me. This wasn't arrogance, it was alignment, with time, with self, with power. That's how he became untouchable. Not by forcing the world to kneel, but by becoming the one it couldn't ignore. To become immune to manipulation, one must master the rarest skill in modern life: emotional detachment. Thomas didn't always possess it. In his younger years, he reacted like most men do, quick to anger, quick to defend, quick to bleed emotionally in public. But experience, especially painful experience, taught him a powerful truth. The man who cannot be provoked cannot be controlled. The battlefield of life is littered with men who lost not because they were weak, but because they allowed themselves to be emotionally pulled off center. Manipulators thrive on emotional reaction. They bait your pride, test your insecurity, and wait for you to flinch. Once you do, they own the outcome. Thomas had learned to build his fortress from within. That meant developing a calm, so unshakable, even direct attacks felt like wind brushing against stone. When people tried to provoke him, clients, rivals, even loved ones, he practiced stillness. He didn't flinch. He didn't explain. He didn't retaliate. And the silence that followed made them more uncomfortable than any outburst ever could. This form of detachment is not apathy. It is control. It is choosing when and if your emotions deserve expression. Emotional maturity isn't about not feeling. It's about choosing not to be enslaved by those feelings. Neuroscientists call this emotional regulation, the ability to pause between stimulus and response. It's one of the clearest markers of leadership, resilience, and long-term success. Thomas often coached young professionals to delay reaction. Don't answer the email angry, he'd say. Don't respond to insult with noise. Let your silence unsettle them. Let them wonder. The strategy worked. It wasn't just tactical, it was transformational. He became known for his calm under pressure. In negotiation rooms, his silence created tension. In relationships, his restraint earned respect. People learned they couldn't play games with him because he never showed his cards. His detachment became dominance. This approach carried into every part of his life. He trained himself daily, through breathing, through pause, through thought. He redefined pain as preparation and criticism as camouflage. He no longer needed validation, and that made him impossible to manipulate. Imagine someone trying to provoke you in front of others, mocking, testing, pushing. Most would rise, take the bait, lose the room, but not Thomas. He'd look through them, not at them. And the power would shift instantly, because the one who does not react becomes the one who defines the game. This is cold power. This is masculine stoicism. It's not just a philosophy, it's armor. Emotional detachment turns you from reactive to strategic, from vulnerable to untouchable. Thomas carried this truth like a shield. My mind is mine alone. No one controls me. That belief set him free, from guilt, from approval, from manipulation. And it made him a presence people couldn't rattle, couldn't bend, couldn't break, because once you master your emotions, you master your reality. And in a world ruled by reaction, that makes you a king. In the age of transparency, where everyone is eager to be understood, Thomas chose a different path. He mastered the art of perception, because he knew something most never learn. Power doesn't come from being real. It comes from being perceived as unshakable. The world does not respond to your truth. It responds to your image. The way you are seen dictates the way you are treated. And the man who shapes his own perception becomes the architect of his reality. Thomas carefully crafted how others saw him. He wasn't being deceptive, he was being deliberate. In meetings, he dressed with intention. In conversation, he spoke with weight. He never overshared. He let people know only what they needed to. And what they didn't know, they filled in with their imagination. And imagination, he realized, is far more powerful than truth. This was Machiavellian psychology in action. The moment people believe you are calm, strategic, and dangerous, they treat you as such, even if you've never raised your voice. The appearance of strength becomes more useful than strength itself, because most people never test it. They fear what they believe you could do. He remembered working with a client in Los Angeles, a CEO known for being erratic. Thomas didn't match that energy. He underplayed, spoke softly, maintained a steady tone. Within weeks, the same CEO who dominated others began asking for his opinion with deference, not because Thomas demanded it, but because his calm projected power. Here's the paradox. If people see you as desperate, they'll treat you as replaceable. If they see you as calm and competent, they'll begin to rely on you, even if they don't understand why. That's why Thomas taught others to control their image as fiercely as they control their decisions. Don't post your every thought. Don't expose your every struggle. Don't share your plans before they're real. The more you give away, the easier it is to be misunderstood or dismissed. Instead, use perception as armor. Show discipline. Show silence. Show presence. Appear less often, but with more force. Be the one they remember, not the one they scroll past. People remember mystery. People respect distance, and when you master both, you become untouchable. In social settings, Thomas rarely filled silences. He let others do the talking. They revealed themselves. Meanwhile, his silence built intrigue. People projected confidence onto him, not because he said much, but because he said little. And when he finally spoke, it landed like truth carved in stone. Your reputation, he believed, was a throne. You don't just protect it, you build it brick by brick. Every public action reinforces or weakens it, and once your image is respected, you no longer need to prove yourself. People follow what they fear and trust, and if you appear both, they won't dare test you. Thomas lived by this line: I control how they see me. I decide who I am to the world. It wasn't vanity, it was strategy. Because in a world that rewards appearances, the man who sculpts his own image commands the room, the table, and the future. Perception is power. Build it with intention, and you'll never need permission to lead. Dominance isn't about noise. It's not about being the loudest voice in the room or the flashiest presence on stage. True dominance is about positioning, quiet, strategic, immovable. Thomas understood this better than most. In his early career, he tried to win by working harder than everyone else. He burned himself out chasing every opportunity, fighting every small battle, proving his value at every turn. It worked, briefly, but the power was fragile. The moment he stopped running, it slipped away. It wasn't until he began studying positioning that everything changed. He observed the way the world's most powerful people operated. They weren't rushing. They weren't reactive. They had placed themselves so precisely that their absence would cause collapse. They didn't fight for relevance. They had become essential. Think of a chessboard. The king doesn't chase. He holds position while others move around him. Pawns rush forward. Knights and bishops sacrifice themselves. But the king remains guarded, central, critical. That's what Thomas aimed for. Not applause, not attention, but necessity. He became the person people couldn't proceed without. In business, he developed rare skills others depended on. In his personal life, he became the emotional anchor others leaned on. But he didn't give all of himself. He gave just enough. Enough to make his presence stabilizing and his absence disruptive. This is strategic dominance. It's not built in a day. It's built over time, through competence, consistency, and composure. Thomas never tried to be everything to everyone. He chose to be irreplaceable to the few who mattered. Psychologists refer to this as perceived indispensability. People instinctively protect what they believe they need. And if you make yourself the one they can't do without, you no longer have to demand respect. You receive it automatically. This strategy requires patience. While others chase status and visibility, you build leverage, you develop skill, you build trust. And then, when the system shifts, you are the only stable piece left. Thomas once turned down a promotion that would have made him more visible but less essential. People questioned him. But 5 years later, when the company restructured, the visible ones were cut. Thomas stayed. Why? Because he had built his position beneath the surface, unseen but unshakable. That is the Machiavellian path. Quiet, cold, calculated. You don't need to dominate everyone. You only need to make sure your removal is more painful than your presence. Here's the code he lived by. I am not replaceable. I am inevitable. You must build yourself into a position so embedded that others think twice before acting against you. That's not fear, it's gravity. You become the one they rotate around. So stop proving yourself. Start positioning yourself. Be where the decisions are made. Be where the structure needs you. Make your value so high they can't afford to lose you. Because real power isn't earned by effort alone. It's earned by making yourself the axis of everything that matters. And once you do, dominance isn't loud, it's absolute. Everything Thomas had learned about patience, silence, perception, and positioning led to one final truth. To become untouchable, you must follow a code, a personal philosophy, a way of being that no circumstance, no enemy, no betrayal can shake. Life is not fair. It's not designed to reward the honest or the deserving. It rewards the prepared. It favors those who adapt. And most of all, it bows to those who master themselves. Thomas had seen the game for what it was, a relentless storm. Not just of competition, but of distraction, of emotion, of manipulation. And he had chosen not to be swept up in it. He chose instead to become the one fixed point in a spinning world. He called it the triad of power. First, patience, not passive waiting, but strategic timing. Most men destroy themselves because they move too soon. They panic, they chase, they lunge for scraps. But the man who waits, who watches without fear, becomes the one who strikes with finality. Second, perception. It doesn't matter who you are, it matters who they believe you are. Thomas built his legend not by shouting his truth, but by sculpting his image. Calm, focused, dangerous. People feared the man they imagined, and he gave them nothing to correct their assumptions. Third, positioning. He stopped fighting for approval and started building leverage. He stopped trying to be liked and became essential. When you position yourself correctly, others protect your place because it benefits them. That's not charisma, that's architecture. But beyond the triad was something deeper. Detachment, emotional sovereignty, the refusal to be baited, provoked, or manipulated. Thomas became the man who could stand in front of rage and not flinch, who could walk through loss and not shatter, who could be insulted and offer only a quiet stare. This wasn't suppression. This was mastery. Because he still felt pain, still knew disappointment, but he had learned to use those things as fuel. His scars became sharpened steel, his silence a form of intimidation, his restraint a form of control. And in the final phase of his transformation, Thomas internalized one law above all others. If they cannot read you, they cannot defeat you. If they cannot replace you, they must respect you. If they cannot provoke you, they begin to fear you. This was not about becoming a tyrant. It was about becoming inevitable. The man who does not break, the man who does not beg, the man who never chases, because everything bends toward him. Thomas lived by one mantra now, etched in the back of his journal and the front of his mind. I am inevitable. I am untouchable. And so he walked through life, not faster, not louder, but firmer, with eyes that saw 3 moves ahead, with silence that made others speak first, with timing that never missed. He didn't win every battle. He didn't need to. He won the war within, and that made him a man the world could not shake. This is the code. This is the armor. This is the path. If this truth stirred something in you, if you felt the shift, then say it aloud or write it below. I am inevitable. I am untouchable. And if you're ready to walk this path, to master the mind and forge your presence into power, like this video, subscribe to the channel and share your reflection in the comments. Let the world know you've begun your transformation. This is where the untouchable are born. Stay sharp, stay silent, stay sovereign. After years of watching, learning, and enduring, Thomas understood something very few ever grasp. Control is not about the external. It begins in the mind. And if your mind is chaotic, the world will always own you. The final evolution of his journey wasn't in action, it was in architecture, the design of an internal fortress, not made of brick or steel, but of habits, principles, and unshakable self-discipline. He started small. He cut the noise, reduced digital distractions, spent more time in solitude, journaled daily, guarded his mornings like sacred ground, no scrolling, no outside input, only his own thoughts, sharpened and sifted. Control, he realized, was about boundaries, and that meant saying no, often, to people, to opportunities, to impulses. He wasn't building a life of avoidance. He was building a sanctuary, one that couldn't be invaded by chaos. He restructured his routines with intention. Everything had a purpose, from how he moved his body to how he scheduled his week. No task entered his calendar without earning its place. No emotion took the wheel unless it had something valuable to offer. The mind, like a fortress, must be designed, it must be guarded, and most importantly, it must be respected by its own keeper. Thomas had stopped negotiating with his lower self. He no longer allowed distractions to masquerade as rewards. He didn't chase dopamine, he chased clarity. That's when the real shift happened. His thoughts became sharper, his decisions cleaner, his relationships fewer, but stronger. He no longer needed the world to reflect his worth. His worth lived in silence, in discipline, in the mirror he faced each morning. This internal order radiated outward. People could feel it. They respected it. Even those who didn't like him, didn't challenge him, not because of aggression, but because of presence. A well-ordered mind emits gravity, and gravity bends reality. He became the man who didn't flinch when the markets dropped, when relationships ended, when critics circled. He had built something within that could not be touched. That's what made him different. That's what made him powerful. So many live in reaction. Thomas chose creation. While others chased goals without systems, he built systems that birthed results automatically. While others tried to control others, he controlled himself. And that changed everything. He lived now by a new mantra, simple but absolute. Discipline is freedom. My mind is my fortress. And every morning, before the world could reach him, he whispered, "No one enters my gates without my permission. No one controls my thoughts but me." Because when your mind is yours, your time, your energy, and your destiny are yours too. This is the beginning of cold sovereignty. This is where you become more than a man. You become the architect of your own unshakable reality. To become untouchable is not to escape pain, but to redefine it. That was the cornerstone of Thomas's transformation. His power didn't come from avoiding suffering. It came from converting it into strength. He learned early that pain is inevitable, but victimhood is optional. When life struck him, loss, betrayal, failure, he no longer asked, "Why me?" Instead, he asked, "What now?" Because every wound was raw material, every setback, a forge. There was a season in his life when everything seemed to collapse. His business partner betrayed him, his health deteriorated, relationships fractured. For most men, that would have been the end. But Thomas did something different. He went silent. Not out of weakness, but to regroup, to sharpen, to plan. He treated pain like a sculptor treats stone. Each blow shaped him, cut away what was soft, weak, excessive, left behind only what was lean, necessary, precise. He became harder, not cruel, but unbreakable. He began to store pain like energy. He didn't broadcast his struggle. He let it simmer beneath the surface, waiting. And when the time came to act, that cold fire fueled every step, every speech, every negotiation, every silence. Most people let pain turn them bitter. Thomas let it turn him clear. He saw who was real, who was temporary. He saw what truly mattered. Pain stripped away the noise and left behind only the essential. In neuroscience, this is called stress inoculation. Controlled exposure to adversity actually builds resilience. The brain adapts, the nervous system strengthens. The man who endures repeated pressure without breaking becomes immune to smaller struggles. Pain, when used correctly, is armor. He started to write down every failure, not to dwell, but to study. What patterns repeated? What mistakes were avoidable? How did emotion distort his judgment? Through this, he built an internal map, one that would never lead him into the same fire twice. He didn't run from pain. He didn't fear it. He weaponized it. There's something unsettling about a man who smiles with scars, who walks into a room with quiet eyes that have seen too much. That was Thomas. People didn't know his past, but they could feel his depth. And depth commands respect. He lived now by a code forged from fire. My scars are my strength. My pain is my weapon. Because when pain no longer terrifies you, nothing does. You stop hesitating. You stop shrinking. You stop apologizing for wanting more. Thomas didn't wish for a softer life. He trained for a harder one. And in doing so, life began to move for him. Not out of sympathy, but out of respect. That's how you become untouchable, not by avoiding the fire, but by walking through it and coming out sharpened, burned, perhaps. But not broken. Better. Power is not always taken. Not. Sometimes it's attracted. Thomas came to understand that influence at its highest form doesn't require force. It requires mass, an internal gravity that pulls people, circumstances, and opportunities into orbit. He no longer chased. He stopped sending long emails, stopped over-explaining, stopped trying to convince people of his value. He simply became so consistent, so centered, so necessary that people came to him. That's when he realized the truly powerful don't force alignment. They create it through presence. How? By building mass in 4 dimensions: discipline, value, mystery, and calm. Discipline was first. Thomas kept promises to himself. He followed through, even when no one was watching. This created trust, not with others, but within. And internal trust is what radiates as external confidence. Second was value. He became excellent at what he did, not flashy but reliable. While others spread themselves thin, Thomas went deep. He made himself a solution no one else could replicate. That created demand, not because he asked for it, but because he became the answer. Mystery came next. He didn't share everything. He wasn't accessible to everyone. He chose his words. He withheld his plans. And that silence made people curious. Curiosity became respect, and respect became influence. Finally, calm. Thomas refused to mirror the anxiety of the world. In crisis, he slowed down. In conflict, he softened his voice. In chaos, he became the stillness others needed. That steadiness pulled people toward him like a magnet. This is gravitational power, not loud but inescapable. He used this in relationships too. He no longer tried to fix or prove or please. He just lived aligned with his code. And the right people, those with strength, clarity, and depth, found their way to him. The rest fell away, no force necessary. That's when Thomas knew. The strongest move isn't always a strike. Sometimes it's stillness. Stillness so focused, so grounded, that everything else organizes itself around you. Physics mirrors this. Objects with greater mass pull smaller ones into orbit. So it is with people. Become denser in discipline, deeper in thought, stronger in self-control, and the world will bend without resistance. He stopped trying to control everything. Instead, he controlled himself, and in doing so, control found him. He lived now by this phrase, I don't chase, I attract, I am gravity. There was no arrogance in it, just peace, peace born of structure, peace born of purpose. And if you truly understand this, you'll realize the power you seek isn't out there. It's in how you carry yourself, how you show up, what you allow, what you ignore. Thomas no longer asked, what do I want? He asked, who must I become to draw it toward me? Because when you build inner mass, you don't need to push. You become the force that pulls. Every battle is won before it's fought. That was the truth Thomas lived by in his final phase of mastery. He no longer sought to win in the moment. He won by design. By placing himself so strategically, so intentionally, that any threat to his position was already too costly to pursue. This was the principle of inevitability. He had become too central to be removed, too embedded to be ignored, too disciplined to be defeated. He stopped seeking applause and started seeking leverage, because applause fades, but leverage lasts. In business, Thomas made himself the hinge. Nothing moved without his awareness. He didn't demand control. He created systems that made him the essential gear. Remove him, and things stalled. That's not ego, that's architecture. In his personal life, he reduced drama to zero. He surrounded himself only with those who added to his peace, not drained it. He didn't confront chaos, he outgrew it. And what couldn't grow with him simply dissolved. He understood something few ever do. Being needed is more powerful than being liked. When people depend on your clarity, your steadiness, your results, they move around you. You no longer have to fight. Your position fights for you. Strategic dominance isn't about winning arguments. It's about avoiding them entirely because your reputation ends them before they start. Thomas had become known as the man who didn't speak often, but when he did, it changed direction. That's not charisma. That's restraint weaponized. He avoided battles that drained energy, picked only the ones that repositioned him higher. When tempted by distraction, he asked, will this increase my influence or drain my control? If the answer was the latter, he let it go. He thought like a fortress builder. He didn't just want to win. He wanted to build something that couldn't be undone, something that made him irreplaceable, not just today, but 10 years from now. And so, he planned decades ahead. His moves were boring to outsiders, silent investments, discreet alliances, quiet retreats to recharge. But all of it added weight to his name, to his presence. Over time, his absence became more noticed than most people's presence. That's when he knew he had succeeded. Power didn't require an announcement. He had built it layer by layer, until to challenge him would be to dismantle the very structures others relied on. He wrote these words on a blank page in his office. I am not replaceable. I am inevitable, not as arrogance, as commitment. A reminder to continue living with precision, building with purpose, choosing with foresight. Because the highest form of power is not dominance, it's inevitability. When your existence becomes a requirement for progress, you no longer have to demand anything. The world delivers it. This is how kings rise, not by chasing the throne, by building the only throne that fits them. This is strategic dominance, cold, quiet, final. There comes a moment in every man's journey when he no longer seeks to be more. He simply becomes what he was always meant to be. For Thomas, that moment came not with a roar, but with a quiet morning, a still room, and the weight of his own silence. He had walked the path of cold power, mastering patience, silence, restraint, perception, and positioning. But now, he understood something deeper. All of it had been preparation. The real battle had never been with the world. It was with himself. To be untouchable is not to be invincible. It is to be immovable, centered, anchored in principle so deeply that no storm can uproot you. Not fear, not loss, not betrayal. You move through life not like a sword, but like gravity. He looked in the mirror that final morning and didn't see perfection. He saw clarity. He saw a man who no longer chased anything, who no longer reacted, who no longer explained. He had become sovereign. His presence no longer asked for respect. It commanded it, not through fear, but through consistency, through earned discipline, through a quiet that echoed louder than 1,000 shouts. Thomas had become a force, not because of what he controlled outside, but because of what he mastered inside. No one could rattle him, no one could rush him, and no one could replace him. That is what it means to be untouchable. And this code, this journey, is not reserved for the few. It's available to anyone who dares to burn their old patterns and forge themselves in silence. So here it is, laid bare. Be patient. Let the fools rush. Wait, watch, and strike only when the time is perfect. Be silent. Let others speak their weaknesses. You reveal nothing. You remain the mystery. Be calm. When chaos surrounds you, become stillness. Let others drown in noise while you collect your power. Be deliberate. Move only with purpose. Speak only with impact. Withhold when tempted. Act only when certain. Be sovereign. Build your life on your own code. Let no one guilt you, shame you, provoke you, or define you. And most of all, never forget, I am inevitable. I am untouchable. This is not the end. It's the beginning of your reign. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to explain it. You only have to live it daily, quietly, absolutely. Now it's your turn. If these words reached a part of you that needed awakening, if something inside you stirred with recognition, then do this now, like this video. Subscribe to the channel and write your truth in the comments. Declare who you are becoming. Declare what you will no longer tolerate. Declare the new code you live by. Because this isn't just a message, it's a mirror. And if you looked into it and saw something greater, you are already on the path. Stay silent, stay sovereign, and never forget, the world bends to the one who does not bow.